one mission, and his life would change forever. A simple man got the task from Moses to be a spy. His mission was to explore the land God had promised Israel. But when he arrived, he saw something that made the whole Israel tremble in fear. But to understand how he got to that town and who those people were, we must first go back to the beginning of Caleb's story. He was just a leader from the tribe of Judah, nothing more. He didn't carry a crown. He didn't carry an army of his own. But he was about to walk into a land filled with giants. His name was Caleb, and this is not just a story about a spy. It is the story of the one man who never let fear control him. Moses called 12 men forward, one from each tribe of Israel, to stand before him at the edge of the camp. Caleb was one of them. The mission was simple but terrifying. Walk into Canaan, the land God had promised, and see what was waiting there. Moses gave them clear instructions. See what the land is like. See whether the people living in it are strong or weak, few or many. See whether the cities are open or fortified with walls, and bring back some of the fruit of the land. Caleb packed dried bread and a skin of water, tied them to his belt, gathered his staff, and set out with the other 11 men toward the north. But what he didn't know was that giants were waiting for him. The 12 men crossed the dry wilderness on foot, climbing rocky hills under the scorching sun, resting only when the heat became too much to bear. They moved carefully once they crossed into Canaan itself, staying off the main roads, keeping to the edges of fields and the shadows of hillsides, so they would not be noticed by the people living there. They watched cities from a distance before walking close enough to study their walls and gates, careful never to draw attention to themselves. Day after day, they pushed further north, slipping past settlements unseen until they reached the region of Hebron, and there they froze. Standing near the gates were men taller than anything they had ever seen, their shoulders wide as door frames, their arms thick as the trunks of young trees, their spears taller than any spear carried by a soldier in Israel's camp. These were the sons of Anak, and the sight of them sent fear into the hearts of most of the 12. The spies did not stay near Hebron long. They kept moving, careful and quiet, slipping past fields and settlements until they reached the Valley of Eshcol. There, hanging low from heavy vines, was a single cluster of grapes so massive that 2 men had to cut a pole, slide it through the stem, and carry it balanced between their shoulders. They gathered pomegranates and figs alongside it, wrapping them carefully so the fruit would survive the long walk back. With their evidence gathered, the 12 men turned south again, retracing their steps through the hills and across the dry wilderness, until 40 days after they had first set out, the camp of Israel came back into view. When they returned, the whole nation gathered to hear what they had seen. The spies held up the heavy cluster of grapes for everyone to look at. Caleb held nothing back. He told the people the land was good, that they were well able to take it, and that the Lord who brought them out of Egypt would give them the victory. But 10 of the other spies spoke differently. They spoke of the giants in Hebron, of cities surrounded by towering walls, of nations too strong and too numerous to defeat. They said the men of Israel would look like grasshoppers next to the people living in that land. Fear spread through the camp like fire through dry grass, passing from tent to tent until the whole assembly was weeping and crying out. The people began to cry out, ready to choose new leaders and turn back toward Egypt instead of facing what lay ahead of them. Caleb stepped forward in front of everyone, standing beside Joshua. He raised his voice over the weeping crowd and told them not to be afraid, that the Lord who had parted the sea and brought them safely out of Egypt would surely give them this land. Joshua tore his clothes in grief at what the other 10 had said and stood with Caleb, pleading with the people to trust God instead of fear. But the people would not listen. They picked up stones from the ground, ready to kill both men, right there, in front of the whole camp. Then, the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting, and his anger burned against the people for their unbelief.
Before we continue, these videos take hours and hours to make. If you could please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching from.
He declared that because they had refused to trust him after everything they had seen him do, none of that generation, 20 years old and upward, would live to enter the promised land. They would wander instead through the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for every day the spies had spent in Canaan, until every one of them had died in the desert. Only 2 men among that entire generation would be allowed to enter the land. Those 2 men were Caleb and Joshua. For the next 40 years, Caleb watched the wilderness swallow his entire generation. Camp after camp was set up and torn down again, moving from place to place across the dry land. Grave after grave was dug in the sand until almost no one remained who remembered the giants of Hebron the way he did. Caleb grew older through those years, watching the friends he had grown up with die one by one, exactly as God had said. But Caleb never forgot what he had seen with his own eyes. He carried that promise inside him like a fire that refused to go out, waiting patiently through every long, dry year for the day God had spoken of. 40 years passed, and the wilderness generation was finally gone. Moses died on the mountain overlooking the land of Canaan, never setting foot inside it himself. Joshua took his place leading the people. The army of Israel crossed the Jordan River on dry ground, marched against the city of Jericho, watched its massive walls collapse after 7 days, and began moving through the land, city by city, claiming the territory God had promised to give them so many years before. One of the most interesting parts of Caleb's life came many years later, after Israel had crossed the Jordan and Joshua had become their leader. Most of the land had already been divided among the tribes of Israel by that time. Caleb, now 85 years old, walked up to Joshua at Gilgal and reminded him of a promise made decades earlier at Kadesh Barnea. He told Joshua how Moses had sworn an oath that day, that because he had remained faithful and unafraid when the other spies gave in to fear, the land of Hebron, the very place where the giants once stood, would belong to him and his descendants forever. Joshua listened, remembered the oath, and blessed Caleb, granting him Hebron as his inheritance. But Hebron was not empty when Caleb arrived to claim it. The same 3 giants Caleb had seen as a young man still ruled the city. Their names were Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, sons of Anak, the very giants whose size had once made the rest of Israel tremble with fear. Caleb called together his brothers and his kinsmen from the tribe of Judah, gathered weapons and supplies, and assembled his men at the edge of the hill country. Caleb led his men out at dawn, walking the long road up into the hills toward Hebron. They carried their weapons slung over their shoulders, moving steadily through the dry terrain, past fields and small settlements, until the walls of Hebron finally came into view, sitting on its hill, exactly as Caleb remembered it from 45 years before. The same gates, the same high walls, the same land that had once filled an entire nation with terror. Word of Israel's victories had already spread through the land. The fall of Jericho, the fall of Ai, city after city falling one after another. And fear had begun to creep into Hebron long before Caleb's men ever reached its gates. The sons of Anak, accustomed to ruling over every nation around them without challenge, gathered what defenders they had and prepared to make their stand, certain that no army from the wilderness could stand against men of their size and strength. Caleb gathered his men just outside the city and gave the order to advance. They moved forward together, surrounding the approaches to Hebron, cutting off every road the giants might use to escape or call for help from neighboring cities. Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai stood at the front of their people, towering over every man around them, certain their size alone would be enough to break the army marching toward their gates. But Caleb did not stop. He led his men forward, pressing into the city, street by street, gate by gate, refusing to be driven back by the sheer size of the men standing against him. The fighting stretched on as Caleb's men pushed deeper into Hebron, forcing the giants back through their own streets, past their own homes, toward the far edge of the city they had ruled for generations. Slowly, the towering sons of Anak were driven out, first from the gates, then from the city itself, until they had nothing left to stand on but the open hills beyond Hebron's walls. Caleb and his men did not stop pursuing them until the giants were fully driven out of the land, far from the city that would now belong to Caleb and his family. This is recorded in the book of Joshua, chapter 15, where it says, Caleb drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak. The same account is repeated again in the book of Judges, confirming that Judah, with Caleb leading them, went up against Hebron and drove out the giants who had ruled it for generations. With the giants gone, Caleb walked through the gates of the city he had first seen 45 years earlier, as a frightened young spy among 11 other men, too afraid to believe what their own eyes had shown them. Caleb did not stop there. Even after Hebron was secured, he turned his attention to the surrounding land, calling his family together and encouraging them to press further into the hill country and take hold of what still remained. He offered his daughter, Aksa, in marriage to whoever would go up and capture the nearby city of Debir. His relative Othniel rose to the challenge, leading his men against the city, taking it and receiving Aksa as his wife in return. Through this, the family of Caleb continued spreading across the hill country of Judah, claiming more and more of the land that had once seemed impossible to take. Caleb's portion of land became known throughout Israel as a lasting reminder of what it meant to trust God completely, even when everyone else gave in to fear.
These videos take hours and hours to make. If you could please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching from.